The night smelled like gunpowder and rain. My hands were shaking, soaked in blood, his blood. The sound of pigs tearing through the dark still haunts me. People think revenge is loud, but mine was quiet and necessary. If anyone told me my best friend would hurt my daughter, I'd have laughed. But that was before everything broke. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. They say war changes a man, but nothing changes him like betrayal. I'd seen men die in deserts, storms, and blackouts, but none of that prepared me for what was waiting in my own backyard. My name's Hunter Clark. I served 8 tours as an Army Ranger, trained to protect, survive, obey. But at home, I forgot the one rule that keeps soldiers alive. Never let your guard down. When I got back from deployment 6 months ago, life was perfect. My daughter Violet was turning 12, bright-eyed and full of questions. My wife Morgan had decorated the house for my return, candles lit, music playing. And my best friend Julian Hale, the man who once dragged me out of a burning Humvee, was flipping burgers in my backyard like he belonged there. He practically did. Julian was family. He stood by me on the battlefield and in every storm after it. I trusted that man more than I trusted my own heartbeat. That night, we laughed until our ribs hurt. Julian told some old Ranger stories, how I once patched him up in the middle of enemy fire. The backyard lights glowed gold across his face, and when he looked at Morgan, she smiled back, longer than usual. It was subtle, just a moment, one I almost ignored. Almost. Later that night, when everyone went inside, I stayed out on the porch. The wind carried the faint echo of their laughter from the kitchen. Morgan's laugh used to warm me, but that night, it sounded different. Softer, nervous, like guilt wearing perfume. I brushed it off, told myself I was just tired. Veterans imagine things. Trauma rewires you. You see ghosts where there are none. That's what I believed, until little things started piling up. Julian started stopping by more often, sometimes when I wasn't home. He'd bring flowers for Morgan, pretending it was just to thank her for dinner. He picked Violet up from soccer practice once without telling me. Said he was just helping. Every move was small, harmless, and maybe that's why it worked so well. One evening, I came home early from a security meeting. The sun was setting, soft orange slipping through the blinds. I walked in. The house smelled like Morgan's perfume. Something felt off. The air itself felt heavy, like I'd walked into a room moments after a lie had been told. They were sitting together in the living room. Too close. Morgan jumped up when she saw me, nervous laughter breaking the silence. Julian acted normal, too normal. But the reflection in the mirror behind them told the truth. His hand was still on her knee. For a second, everything inside me froze. Years of loyalty, friendship, trust, all torn in one quiet moment. I didn't say a word. I just stared at Julian. And he smiled. The kind of smile you never forget. Not evil. Not scared. Just certain. Like he knew I'd never do anything about it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house felt louder. Every creak, every breath. I watched my daughter sleep through the half-open door, innocent and safe. I promised her, without saying a word, I'd never let anyone hurt her. Especially not someone I once called brother. The next morning, Julian texted me. "You good, Ranger?" I didn't reply, but inside, something had shifted. Soldiers know the exact moment when peace dies. That was mine. The morning after that uneasy silence, the house felt smaller. Walls seemed to listen, floors whispered with guilt under every step Morgan took. She made breakfast like always. Eggs, toast, that same honey-sweet smile. But behind her eyes, something was gone. Something I couldn't unsee after last night. Julian still came around. He always had some excuse, dropping off tools, helping with the fence, checking in on Violet's homework. It used to make sense. We were close enough to be family, but now every visit felt rehearsed. Every word between them felt written before I ever walked in. I caught him watching her once while she poured coffee. A quick glance, soft, almost worshipful. The kind of look a man doesn't waste unless he's already crossed a line. But I didn't say a word. I'd learned something in combat. Patience wins wars. You don't shoot when you're angry. You wait until the enemy stops looking over his shoulder. At night, I'd sit on the porch, staring at the fading trail of Julian's truck lights. Morgan would come out sometimes, standing behind me like a stranger in her own home. The wind would carry her perfume, and I'd feel everything inside me burn. Memory, love, pride. She'd ask if I was okay, and I'd lie. I told her I was fine. But inside, something was forming. Not rage, not hate, just a terrible kind of awareness that the life I protected with my blood was already being taken apart, quietly, piece by piece. A few days later, I stopped by Julian's place. I told myself it was random. It wasn't. His front yard looked like a postcard. New truck, manicured lawn, empty whiskey bottle lying beside the porch. He opened the door with that old grin, the one that once meant the world to me. "Hunter, thought you'd still be resting." Inside his house, the walls told a different story. 2 glasses on the counter, one with lipstick. My wife's shade, coral pearl. Something in me went numb. Not angry, just cold. We talked, pretending everything was normal. He asked about Violet, about training. I answered, watching his hands, his eyes, every twitch. He didn't flinch once. That's when I knew this had been going on longer than I wanted to believe. When I left, he clapped my shoulder, friendly, familiar. But this time my skin crawled. The touch of a man betraying you is worse than any bullet I've taken. That evening, I came home and found Morgan humming in the kitchen, wearing the same shade of lipstick. She asked if I'd eaten. I said yes, but my voice cracked without meaning to. She noticed, maybe even understood that I knew, but said nothing. Days stretched into something like torture. Between us, silence had turned into language. The distance grew, but on the surface, everything looked perfect. Violet stayed cheerful, talking about school, about how Uncle Julian promised to take her fishing one weekend. Her voice was the only thing keeping me from breaking. I watched them, both of them, move around me like actors in a play I didn't audition for, laughing louder when I entered a room, stopping mid-sentence when I looked their way, pretending nothing was wrong, though the truth was dripping from the walls. One night, I woke at 2 a.m. The bed beside me was empty. I found Morgan on the porch with her phone, whispering, smiling. She didn't hear me come up behind her. I didn't look at the screen. I didn't need to. Her voice alone was proof. The softness, the giggle, the secret. She looked back when she sensed me there. Her eyes widened, guilt flashed, quick, sharp, then vanished behind practiced calm. "Couldn't sleep," she murmured. I nodded, walked past her, and went inside. I didn't say another word. The next morning, I watched her pour coffee from the counter. The same movements as every other day, but when Julian's truck pulled up outside, her shoulders stiffened before she turned with that same forced smile. My hand tightened on the coffee mug until it cracked. I thought about the day Julian saved me. The sandstorm, the ambush. He dragged me bleeding through the dirt, whispering that he wouldn't let me die. I buried that man I knew somewhere in that memory. Whatever walked into my house now wasn't him. As the days passed, I began to move differently. Quit drinking. Stopped talking much. Spent hours in my basement, fixing tools, cleaning rifles, sanding wood. Anything to keep my hands busy and my thoughts from turning into something dangerous. But I knew I was changing. The soldier in me had started to wake again, not for war, but for precision, for control, for patience. One evening, as I locked up, my daughter came to kiss me goodnight. She smiled, the same pure smile I used to fight for overseas. And I realized something brutal, that this time, the enemy wasn't in another country. He was right here, sitting at my kitchen table, drinking my coffee, laughing with the woman I married. And soon, I'd have to fight again, not for survival, but for the truth. The silence between us grew louder every day. It clung to the air like smoke after battle. Heavy, bitter, impossible to ignore. Morgan moved through the house quietly now, always on her phone, but never looking me in the eye. Violet noticed it too. Kids sense things before we admit them. One night, a storm rolled across the valley, thunder shaking the windows. Morgan said she was tired and went to bed early. But the glow under the bedroom door told a different story. I waited. Rangers know how to wait. 2 hours later, her breathing was slow, steady, or pretending to be. I unlocked her phone. I didn't plan it. I just needed truth. Needed something solid after weeks of guessing. The first message hit harder than any bullet I'd ever taken. Julian, miss your voice tonight. Scroll. Morgan, you'll hear it tomorrow. Hunter's going to the base at 8. Scroll. Julian, I still can't believe he trusts me that much. Morgan, he always did. That's what makes it easy. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My pulse pounded so hard I could hear it in the walls. There were photos too, blind kisses, hands that weren't mine, sheets I recognized. And somehow, the ugliest part wasn't the affair itself. It was the laughter. They looked happy. That night, something inside me cracked, quiet, permanent. I walked out to the porch barefoot, rain soaking through my t-shirt, just standing there in the dark. Lightning flashed across the field, lighting up my own reflection in the sliding glass door. That man staring back wasn't the same one who left for war. His eyes were emptier now. Cleaner, almost. When Morgan woke up, I was sitting in the kitchen, still holding her phone. She froze in the doorway. No yelling. No screaming. Just silence thick enough to choke on. I saw it, I said. My voice didn't even sound like mine. Everything. She didn't cry. Didn't deny it. She just placed her hands on the counter and whispered, Hunter, please, please what? I asked. But my tone wasn't anger. It was calm, controlled, like standing over a sniper's trigger. She started talking fast. Excuses, apologies, fear. Said Julian, understood her. Said I'd been gone too long, too distant. That war ruined me. All the classic phrases broken people tell themselves to make betrayal feel like healing. I stood up, and she flinched. But I didn't move toward her. I just stared through her, like she was already gone. You chose him, I said. Now you live with that choice. She followed me, crying now. I didn't mean, but I walked out before she could finish. In war, you don't waste words on lost ground. You regroup. The next day, Julian showed up like nothing happened. I met him in the driveway, blocking his path. He smiled that same fake, friendly grin. You okay, brother? I didn't answer. I just turned away, letting silence hang heavier than shouting ever could. He hesitated, maybe realizing for the first time that something in me was different, colder. That night, I turned to what I knew best, recon. If Julian wanted a war of deception, I'd treat it like combat. I installed cameras around the house, bought a small audio recorder, placed it under the porch bench where they often sat to talk. It wasn't revenge yet. It was intelligence gathering. The next week was a blur of numbness. I worked, ate, barely slept. Morgan tried to act normal. Julian played his charming self in front of others. But on Friday evening, I finally got what I needed. Proof not just of betrayal, but intent. Julian's voice on the recorder crackled low. She'll be fine, Morgan. I'll help you get full custody once he snaps. Trust me. The guy's one outburst away from losing everything. Then her voice, quiet but clear. I just want it over. Once he's gone, I can breathe again. That line didn't just break me. It erased every memory I ever cared about. That night, I replayed the recording over and over until their words didn't even sound like English anymore. When you realize the two people you trusted most in this world are actively planning how to destroy you, something in your soul changes shape. By sunrise, I had packed a small bag, laptop, cash, a burner phone, my daughter's photo. I kissed Violet on the forehead while she slept. And I promised her, not out loud, but deep inside my chest, that one day, she'd know the truth about who destroyed this family, and it wouldn't be me. Before leaving for base that morning, I looked at Morgan one last time. She stood on the porch, trying to read my face. For the first time in years, she couldn't. That's when the ranger in me woke fully. Quiet, focused, calculated. This wouldn't be settled through lawyers or tears anymore. From now on, I would fight the way I was trained, patiently, precisely, and without warning. The days that followed felt like walking through a fog that only I could see. Everything looked normal from the outside. Neighbors waved, Violet laughed, Morgan cooked dinner. But beneath it, something rotten was spreading. Every smile had a knife now. Every quiet moment had weight. At work, I barely spoke to anyone. My commanding officer asked if I was okay, said I looked tired. I told him I was fine. What was I supposed to say? That my best friend was sleeping with my wife and planning to destroy what I was bleeding to protect? Morgan had become careful, too careful. She turned her phone off when she came home, stayed overly sweet, overly attentive. Betrayal makes people polite when they're guilty. She even suggested we start fresh, said Julian could help with repairs around the house. I told her sure, pretending to agree while cataloging every sign of her growing panic. Julian, on the other hand, got bolder. He texted less, called more, showed up casually holding paperwork. Leases, property transfers, things I found strange. He talked about helping Violet's future, about moving her to a better school out of town. It was manipulation wrapped in good intentions. But he underestimated one thing. I could read people for survival. That's all war is, reading people's lies before they kill you. 2 weeks later, I decided to test a theory. If they were planning to corner me, they'd show their cards once they thought I was backing down. So I pretended to. I told Julian I was exhausted, that my marriage was falling apart, and I needed space. He nodded, face full of concern, but there was a flicker in his eyes, something like victory. The following weekend, I left town for work. In truth, I parked 2 blocks away from his house and waited. By midnight, her car pulled up. Morgan. Same route. No hesitation. She walked to his door like she'd done it 100 times and disappeared inside. The porch light flicked off after 5 minutes. I stayed in that car for hours, rain running down the windshield, my pulse a gun barrel ready to fire. But rage wasn't my weapon now, proof was. The next morning, I received an email from an old lawyer friend, someone I'd helped years ago after his deployment. I told him to dig quietly into Julian's business holdings and property. Within 2 days, the truth exploded bigger than I expected. Offshore accounts, false invoices, and worse, Julian had been quietly shifting assets into Morgan's name. My home, my land, even my pension fund had been linked to a joint signature transfer. They weren't just betraying me. They were cutting me out of my own life while I was still alive. The next time Julian came by, I watched him roll up my driveway with that same cheer in his voice. He greeted Violet warmly, passed her a stuffed bear, and asked where her mom was. When Morgan came out, I saw her hand tremble slightly when their fingers brushed. The kind of shake guilt gives you when you think nobody's watching. I think we should talk about paperwork, Julian said, still smiling. I realized then how deep his manipulation had gone. He wasn't just using Morgan. He was controlling her through fear and greed, promising her a new start if I disappeared, convincing her that his money and power made him untouchable. The next few weeks turned into psychological warfare. Julian started spreading rumors that I was unstable, paranoid. Morgan quietly told friends that my PTSD had worsened, that I was drinking again, lies meant to build a record. I saw the pattern. They were trying to destroy my credibility, to make sure when things finally broke, nobody would believe me. The final spark came one night when I overheard Morgan on a whispered phone call, pacing the kitchen. Her voice was low, sharp. No, he doesn't suspect anything. I'm not scared. Just keep your end clear. Hunter leaves again next week, and once he's gone, I'll push it through. My heart slowed instead of racing. That's how you know the soldier has returned. No panic, no yelling. Just quiet focus. I started playing their game back, but better. I documented everything. Phone screenshots, audio clips, bank records. I printed copies and hid them in a safety box under my truck's false floor. When war becomes personal, strategy is your last mercy. A few days before I planned to disappear, Julian stopped by again with papers for my signature. He said they were just updates for Violet's school fund, something bureaucratic. My hand brushed the page and I saw it. The fine print of property transfer. My name was already signed. A perfect forgery. I looked up at him. His smile didn't falter. That was the moment I knew any trace of brotherhood was dead. He had crossed the line from betrayal to destruction. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat beside Violet's bed, listening to her soft breathing, staring at the small bandage on her knee from a soccer fall. She looked peaceful, untouched by the poison around us. I promised myself she'd stay that way, even if I had to bury the ghosts myself. 2 mornings later, I found Morgan sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes red like she hadn't slept. She tried to speak, to justify everything, but I stopped her. All you had to do was love me honestly, I said quietly. Now you'll have to live with what you've built. She broke then, real tears for the first time. Said Julian had convinced her it was the only way, that he promised safety, future, stability. She said she couldn't stop even if she wanted to now. He had leverage on her too. I almost pitied her. Almost. But pity dies when bullets enter the story. 3 days later, I was driving Violet to a weekend camp when Julian called. He said there'd been a small accident at the cabin, asked me to drop by if I could. His tone was casual, but I caught the edge beneath it, like bait under calm water. I told him I'd come by the following weekend. That night, Morgan confessed the trap he was setting. Julian had suggested meeting me at the cabin with documents to make peace. But in truth, he wanted a confrontation. She said he bragged about provoking me, said if I snapped and hit him, it'd be enough to claim abuse, to strip me of custody and finish it all. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was entrapment. I listened, silent, as she cried. Her words blurred together, apologies tangled in fear. And then, almost in a whisper, she said, "He's losing control, Hunter. He's drinking more. He carries a gun everywhere now." For a moment, the soldier in me paused, reading it not as confession, but as data. A pattern forming. A dangerous one. I didn't respond. I simply walked to the basement, opened the old Ranger chest I hadn't touched in years, and stared at the engraved rifle, my service weapon, decommissioned but still alive in memory. My name etched along its metal line. It wasn't revenge I felt. It wasn't anger. It was inevitability, like 2 storms set on a single course. People think betrayal burns fast, but it doesn't. It decays slowly, like rust eating steel from the inside out. And by the time you see the holes, it's too late to fix them. That week, Julian stopped calling. Morgan stopped pretending. And I started planning, not for confrontation, but closure. I booked Violet's school transfer myself, changed our accounts, and sent a letter through my lawyer scheduling mediation for property division. If Julian wanted war, he'd get it, but on my terms, and not with guns or courts. I didn't know then that the final battle wouldn't take place between contracts or words. It would happen under rain, under trees, beside a cabin where trust had once been real, and where one wrong pull of a trigger would change everything forever. It was a Friday evening, the kind that pretended to be peaceful while hiding thunder underneath. The sunset burned low across the fields, stretching long shadows toward my porch. Violet was packing her bag for a small weekend stay with her aunt, excited about riding horses. Morgan helped her, trying too hard to look normal. Her hands shook as she folded clothes, and I knew she felt the weight of silence closing in. Julian hadn't called in 2 weeks, but that didn't mean he was gone. That kind of evil doesn't vanish. It watches, waits, and strikes when you think you're rebuilding. He had always been patient like that, the kind who smiled while calculating the next move. By the 3rd week, court letters arrived, divorce papers from Morgan's new lawyer. Clean, cold, professional. There it was, the final line of their plot. My marriage, property, reputation, even my identity, laid out like a target. The petition said I was emotionally unstable, a danger to the household, and unfit for parental responsibility. the kind of words built to destroy a man quietly. I remember staring at the page until the ink blurred. Julian's fingerprints were all over it. He'd planted those lies like landmines. Every time I'd spoken in anger, every distant stare, every quiet moment of pain, he'd twisted them into evidence. That night, I poured myself a glass of whiskey, my first in months. I didn't drink to forget. I drank to remember everything clearly, to burn every word from that paper into memory. Then I tore the packet in half, tossed the pieces into the sink, and ran them under water until the ink washed away. The story they tried to write for me was gone. But in every story like this, there's always one miscalculation. They forgot I wasn't a broken man. I was a trained one. Julian reached out the next day, pretending peace. Said he hated how messy things had gotten, that he wanted to meet and clear the air. He chose neutral ground, the cabin near Old Mill Creek, the same one where the three of us used to spend long summers fishing and telling war stories beneath the stars. He knew that place meant something to me. He used it like bait, and I pretended to take it. When I arrived, the evening had folded into darkness, thick and heavy. Julian waited on the porch, a beer in one hand, the other stuffed in his jacket pocket. I could smell the alcohol before I even stepped near him. There was a twitch in his jaw, nervous energy trying to pass for charm. "Good to see you, brother," he said. Brother. That word hit differently now, like an insult carved deep. I watched his eyes. Drunk, glassy, restless. His smile was wide but hollow, like a man clinging to a lie that stopped working weeks ago. Inside, the cabin was cluttered, bottles everywhere, half-packed boxes on the floor. He sat down, motioning for me to join him. "Let's start over, Hunter. This whole thing, it's gone too far." I didn't move. I just stood by the door, every instinct humming. "You nearly cost me my daughter," I said quietly. He set his drink down, feigning hurt. "You think I'd ever hurt her? I love Violet like my own." "Exactly the problem," I said. The air shifted then, the kind of silence that comes before something breaks. He stood up slowly, circling the small room, words slurring more with every breath. "You were always the hero, huh? The soldier, the saint. Everyone looks up to you. But you come home, and you're just another guy who can't keep his family happy." He stopped inches from me, eye to eye. "You couldn't protect what was yours, Hunter. That's all this is." I saw it then, the glint of a gun tucked in his waistband. Drunk or not, he'd brought a weapon. "What are you gonna do?" I asked, calm as a whisper. Julian smirked. "Finish what you started." The next few seconds blurred into chaos. The beer bottle hit the wall, shattering. He pulled the gun quick, waving it, sloppy but dangerous. I didn't flinch. I'd faced worse aim under fire than a drunk friend with a grudge. But then everything twisted. Violet's small voice broke the air. "Dad?" I turned, and there she was. My daughter, standing at the cabin door, rain dripping from her shoes. Morgan had dropped her off early, saying I'd forgotten something. She shouldn't have been there. Julian's expression shifted from shock to panic. "She wasn't supposed to," Violet screamed. The gun went off. The sound ripped through everything. Through the rain, through my body, through years of brotherhood. She fell sideways, hitting the floor, clutching her leg. My world stopped. Julian froze too, realizing what he'd done. His hand shook, his face pale. "Hunter, I didn't mean," but I was already moving. Training took over. I disarmed him in 2 moves, automatic, brutal, efficient. He hit the floor hard, coughing, blood on his lip. I didn't kill him. Not yet. I lifted my daughter, carried her out into the rain, pressing my jacket to her wound, whispering, "You're okay. You're okay. Baby, I got you." The hospital lights blurred white against storm clouds. Hours passed. She survived. The bullet had torn through her thigh, narrowly missing the femoral artery. The doctors said she'd walk again, but not without scars. Morgan cried when she arrived, but I didn't look at her. I just sat beside Violet's bed, holding her hand. My little girl slept through the morphine haze, her heartbeat steady and fragile beneath my palm. Police came the next morning, questions sharp and cold. I told them Julian's gun misfired during an argument, that he panicked and fled. They took notes, promised an investigation. But I could tell by their tone that money would bury this faster than truth ever could. That evening, I got the call I already expected. Julian had confessed to a tragic accident, his lawyer preparing a statement before sunset. No arrest. No charges yet. He called it self-defense gone wrong. He claimed I lunged first, and my daughter got caught in the crossfire. I didn't yell, didn't storm out. I just asked which hospital he was at for assessment. The officer told me he'd already checked out on bail. Bail. 2 hours after shooting a child. Morgan sat beside me in that stiff hospital chair, asking what I'd do. I looked at her and said, nothing. And she believed me. But in my head, the war had already started. That night, I stood outside under the glow of parking lot lamps, staring at my reflection in a black car window. Rain fell again. Storms seemed to follow this story everywhere. I thought about the oath I made the day Violet was born, that I'd protect her from every nightmare this world carried. I used to think those nightmares were out there, in deserts and battlefields. But they were right here, wearing the face of my closest friend. Some men deserve forgiveness. Some only understand fear. By the time dawn broke, my decision was carved into stone. I wasn't a husband anymore. I wasn't even just a father. I was a soldier again, a man returning to finish a mission that should have ended long ago. Julian thought the law would save him. He forgot the law isn't what keeps men like me in line. It's conscience. And mine was gone. The sun fell behind the pines that night, like it was too ashamed to watch. I remember driving home in silence, the kind that hums through your bones, not your ears. Violet was still in the hospital, her small body wrapped in white sheets, machines blinking beside her. Morgan stayed with her while I drove back to the cabin, the place where everything had broken. I told the police I just wanted to gather my things, but that was a lie. Soldiers learn to live inside lies when necessary. When I stepped onto that porch again, the smell of smoke and gunpowder still lingered. The blood on the floor had been scrubbed off, but not well enough. Faint stains clung to the wood like ghosts. I stood there for a long time, remembering every second of how the world collapsed in that moment. Julian's truck wasn't there. He was out on bail, free, untouched, probably laughing somewhere. But his pride would bring him back. I knew it. I knew the kind of man he was. Those types can't handle silence or guilt. They come back to look at the damage, to feel control again. And I planned to be waiting when he did. Over the next few days, I worked methodically, like back in the military when I expected the enemy's next move before it happened. I checked every path around the cabin, every slope, every footprint that wasn't mine. Then I started tracking patterns, beer cans, cigarette butts, recent tire marks in the mud near the tree line. Julian had already been watching me again. The thought almost made me laugh. Even after shooting Violet, he couldn't stop circling back like a vulture. When Morgan came by to grab a few things for the hospital, she froze seeing me there. Her face looked hollow, as if she hadn't slept since that night. She whispered that Julian was calling her again, sending voice notes, saying he wanted to make things right. She said he blamed the gun, the weather, even me. I told her to record it all. For once, she didn't argue. She handed me her phone later that night, and I listened. Julian's voice came through the speaker, shakier than usual. We just lost control. It wasn't supposed to happen. Tell him I didn't mean to. He knows I'd never hurt Violet. I just need him to calm down before I fix this. He's dangerous when angry. I stared at the phone, thumb pausing over the screen. That last part wasn't guilt. It was manipulation again. He was turning himself into the victim. I looked at Morgan and said, "You don't talk to him again. Not one more word." She nodded, tears spilling. Maybe for Violet. Maybe for herself. I didn't care which anymore. That night, I stayed at the cabin, sitting alone in the dark beside the window. The rain came again, soft and cold. Through the blur of pine trees, I saw the beam of headlights appearing far down the dirt road. Julian, right on schedule. He parked 100 feet out, thinking he was careful. He didn't know I'd set up cameras hidden in the trees. I watched on a live feed through my phone as he stepped out, swaying slightly, a bottle in one hand. He paced near the tree line, muttering, rehearsing what to say. His voice carried across the rain when he shouted, "Hunter, we need to talk." I didn't answer. I just let him keep yelling into the night. Rain washed his face until it looked like he was crying. He tried again, slamming his bottle against his truck door. "You hear me, man? You think this is over?" I stepped out then, slowly, letting the door creak. My boots hit the porch boards one heavy step at a time. When he saw me, he froze, but only for a second. Then he forced a laugh. "Finally, you've been hiding out here acting like I'm some kind of monster. Weren't you?" He flinched. "You think I wanted this?" She. I raised a hand. "Don't say her name." He swallowed hard, shaking his head. "You don't understand, brother, it was an accident. I was drunk, and the gun." I stepped closer, water dripping down my face, voice calm. "Accidents happen once. You aimed that gun 3 times. Julian stumbled back, his composure cracking. "Don't do this. You don't want this. You've already lost everything. You don't want to lose your soul too." "I lost that the minute you pointed a weapon at my child." For a moment, he stood there, trembling, looking smaller than I remembered. Once, he'd been the man who pulled me out of the sand, bleeding and broken. Once, I owed him my life. But that night, he became the debt I needed to clear. He reached again for the gun in his jacket, but I was already moving. My hand locked his wrist, twisting until the weapon hit the mud. I could have ended it there, but something inside me needed him to feel it. Not death, but the mirror reflection of what he'd done. The helplessness, the regret too late to matter. I pinned him to the truck, the rain hammering down around us, thunder rolling like the sky itself was watching. "You think I don't know how to kill a man?" I said. He didn't answer. His breath came fast, desperate. "I've learned more ways to end a life than you can count. But this isn't about killing." He blinked, confused, terrified. "Then what is it?" "Ending your story the way you wrote mine." I left him there, alive, bruised, shaking. Took the gun, the bottle, the truck keys, everything. I gave him exactly one choice: leave and never come near my family again. But in my gut, I knew he wouldn't listen. Bullies never do. Guilt doesn't change monsters, it feeds them. I called the police that night myself, said Julian had returned, threatened me again. They promised to file a report, but by morning, nothing came of it. Just words written on useless paper. The next week, Violet came home from the hospital, moving on crutches, her smile weaker, but still there. She asked one question before sleeping that night. "Dad, is Uncle Julian sorry?" I stared at her for a long moment before whispering, "He will be." And though I tried to sound calm, deep inside, I already knew the next time I saw him wouldn't be with words, it would be with finality. The legal system isn't designed for justice. It's designed for those who can afford the best version of the truth. I learned that in a courtroom that smelled of cheap coffee and old wood polish. The judge, a man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, barely glanced up from his paperwork. Julian sat 2 tables away, looking cleaner than he had in weeks, shaved, suited, sober. His lawyer, a slick man with a gold watch that cost more than my truck, whispered in his ear, making Julian nod with practiced remorse. They called it a preliminary hearing. I called it a circus. I sat alone. Morgan was outside in the hallway, pacing. She hadn't been allowed in yet. Julian's defense was simple. The shooting was an accident caused by my aggressive behavior. They claimed I lunged at him during a heated argument, causing the weapon to discharge. They painted me as the volatile ex-soldier with PTSD, the unpredictable ranger who couldn't adjust to civilian life. When the prosecutor read the charges, reckless endangerment and negligent discharge of a firearm, I almost laughed. They weren't charging him with assault, not attempted murder, just negligence. Like he'd forgotten to signal a turn in traffic, not put a bullet in a 12-year-old girl's leg. The judge pushed his glasses up his nose and asked Julian if he understood the charges. Julian stood up, head bowed just enough to look humble. Yes, Your Honor. And I deeply regret the accident. Accident. That word echoed in my skull like a hammer. Then came the bail hearing. Julian's lawyer argued that his client was a pillar of the community, a business owner with deep roots, not a flight risk. He brought up Julian's clean record, conveniently forgetting the drunken harassment, the threats, the slashed tires. None of that had made it into the official report. Funny how money works. The judge granted bail. $50,000. Julian posted it within the hour. I watched him walk out of that courthouse into the sunlight. He paused on the steps to light a cigarette, hands steady. When he saw me standing by my truck, he didn't look away. He smirked. Just a small tilt of the lips, barely visible, but loud enough for me to hear. It said, I win. Morgan came out moments later, eyes red. Hunter. I tried to tell them, she whispered. They wouldn't listen. Doesn't matter now, I said, opening my door. Where are you going? Home. But I didn't go home. I drove straight to the hospital to pick up Violet's prescription. Seeing her limp later that evening, watching her wince as she tried to climb the porch stairs, that was the moment the last shred of faith I had in the system died. Justice is a ghost. You can chase it, scream for it, beg for it, but it doesn't exist unless you make it yourself. That night, I sat in my garage with a map of the county spread out on my workbench. I wasn't looking at roads anymore. I was looking at terrain, access points, blind spots. Julian owned a massive property 10 miles out of town, an old hog farm he'd inherited but rarely used. It was isolated, surrounded by dense woods, and bordered by a creek that flooded every spring. He kept pigs there, hundreds of them, mostly to maintain agricultural tax breaks. But everyone knew what pigs could do. I'd seen it overseas. Farmers used them to clear fields of waste. The thought settled in my mind cold and heavy. I started surveillance again. This time, I wasn't looking for evidence of an affair. I was looking for patterns of life. Julian went there every Tuesday and Thursday night. He liked the solitude, or maybe he was hiding something else. He'd drive his truck down the gravel path, stay for a few hours, then leave. The property had a gate with a keypad, motion sensor lights near the main barn, but the perimeter fence was old wire. Easy to cut, easy to cross. I spent 3 nights just watching from the tree line, dressed in camo, motionless for hours. The rain covered my scent. The darkness covered my shape. I watched him feed the pigs, watched him drink beer on the tailgate of his truck, watched him shoot cans off a fence post with the same reckless arrogance he'd shown at the cabin. He was comfortable, careless. He thought the law had protected him. He thought money had built a wall around him that nothing could breach. He didn't know I was already inside the walls. On the 4th night, I moved closer. I found a spot near the main barn where the shadows were deepest. I checked the ground, soft mud, perfect for silent movement. I checked the wind, blowing away from the house. I wasn't planning a murder. I was planning an extraction of a problem. When I got home that morning before sunrise, Violet was awake. She was sitting in the kitchen with a glass of water, rubbing her leg. Dad, she whispered. Hey, honey. Leg hurting. She nodded. A little. Did the bad man go to jail? I froze, hand on the refrigerator door. I looked at her, innocent, trusting, broken by a man who called himself family. How do you explain to a child that the world doesn't punish monsters? That sometimes monsters wear suits and walk free? Don't worry about him, I said softly, kneeling beside her. He won't hurt anyone ever again. Promise. I kissed her forehead. Ranger promise. She smiled, satisfied, and went back to bed. But a ranger promise isn't just words. It's a contract written in blood, and I intended to keep it. The next day, I sold my second truck for cash. Bought supplies from 3 different towns so no one could track the purchases. Bleach, heavy-duty tarps, a new shovel, and zip ties, industrial strength. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. The system had failed my daughter. It had failed me. It had taken a man who shot a child and let him walk free because he had the right friends and the right bank account. So I decided to introduce him to a different kind of court. One where there are no lawyers, no judges, and no bail. Just cause and effect. The date was set in my mind. Tuesday. Storm forecast. Heavy rain. Perfect weather for hunting. Tuesday came like a pulse in my neck. Steady, cold, inevitable. The kind of day soldiers recognize without being told. The sky stayed gray from morning till dusk, low clouds dragging across the ridgeline, swollen with rain. Violet had an early physical therapy appointment. I watched her limp across the room, determination in every small step, her tiny fingers gripping the metal rail like it was a mountain. Pain never stopped her. She was mine through and through, tougher than she knew. When she finished, I told her we'd celebrate when I got back home that night. She smiled and asked if we could make pancakes. I promised we would. She hugged me tight, small arms pressing against my chest, and just like that, it was done. My last moment of peace. After dropping her off at my sister's, I drove north. No radio, no music, just the rhythm of tires on wet asphalt and the steady hum of memory. The Duane property sat off a rural back road, 10 miles past the county line, isolated, soaked from the storm. The gate stood half open, sagging on its hinges. Typical Julian. He liked to show ownership by neglect. I parked 200 yards out and cut the lights. The smell of mud and feed filled the air, thick enough to taste. Pigs squealed somewhere in the distance, restless in the storm. I sat there for a moment, staring through the windshield, letting rain trickle down the glass, steady as heartbeats. Some people call it vengeance. I called it completion, an equation finally balanced. I checked my watch, 21:34. Right on schedule. Julian's truck headlights appeared down the road, piercing through rain like ghost beams. He pulled in, gate grinding behind him. He didn't notice my vehicle tucked in the tree line. He never did spot the things closest to his own damnation. He parked near the barn and staggered out with a flashlight. I could already tell he'd been drinking again. He shouted something at the pigs, his words slurred, carried by wind. Probably complaining about lawyers or bills or the world owing him something. It didn't matter. I waited until he disappeared inside the barn before getting out. Boots sank quietly into mud. I moved along the fence line, past the broken planks, counting breaths, counting distance. Training never leaves you. It just waits behind your heartbeat. When I reached the edge of the barn, the rain had turned to a steady downpour, muffling all sound. I slipped through a gap in the siding, careful not to disturb the old boards. The inside was dim, just one overhead light swinging weakly. Shadows stretched across hay bales and steel troughs. The pigs were restless, pacing, grunting in rhythmic unease. Animals feel evil before people do. Julian stood near the back, phone tucked between his shoulder and ear, arguing with someone. His lawyer maybe, or Morgan. I couldn't hear much over the rain. Only fragments. He's not going to do anything. He's too scared. The cops already said there's no evidence. Once this blows over, we'll sell everything and leave. Every word confirmed it. The arrogance, the invincibility, the utter lack of regret. I stepped forward, slow and deliberate. The barn door creaked behind me. He turned around, startled. The flashlight beam hit my chest, then my face, freezing there. For the first time, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't pride. It was awareness. H. Hunter. He sputtered, forcing a laugh. What the hell are you doing here? Finishing what you started. Man, come on, he said, stepping back. Look, I didn't mean for any of it. The flashlight trembled. I kept walking until I stood less than 10 feet away. My gear was minimal. Combat knife in boot, silenced sidearm holstered, raincoat zipped to the throat. I wasn't there to show force, just intent. Julian's voice cracked as he raised his hands. You're not thinking straight. She's alive, okay? Violet's alive. You shot her. His hands lowered a little. I was drunk. You know that. You've seen worse drunks in the service. We both. You pulled the trigger 3 times. He stopped talking. I took another slow step forward. You ever count how many seconds a bullet takes to leave a barrel, Julian? It's instant. A decision made in less than a breath. You had time to aim, time to hesitate, but you fired again. That's not an accident. That's intention. He swallowed, water dripping from his hair. You gonna kill me? I didn't answer. The rain answered for me, smashing against the roof like artillery rain. I've got nothing left, he pleaded. You take me down, it won't change what happened. You think your daughter gets better if I'm buried? I tilted my head. No, but you don't get to keep breathing after putting a bullet in a child. His eyes darted to the side, toward the open truck door. Inside it, on the passenger seat, was another gun. He thought I didn't notice. But I did. I let him think otherwise. You really think this makes you a hero again? He spat suddenly, anger cutting through his fear. You think killing me erases what she saw? That you can scare away your guilt? That's where you're wrong. He lunged. The moment slowed the way every firefight does. Sound first vanished, then light. My body moved on instinct, training older than thought. I sidestepped, trapping his wrist and twisting until bone cracked. The flashlight hit the floor, rolling across hay. Its beam flickered, casting half his face in shadow. Julian screamed, grabbed at my coat with his free hand. I shoved him backward into the metal trough. The pig squealed, spooked by movement. He slid in mud, reaching clumsily for the gun tumbling from his pocket. I kicked it away, hard, sending it under the feed containers. The fear that replaced his arrogance wasn't satisfying. It was empty. Hunter, please, I told you to never come near my family again. He crawled backward, slipping on hay and grime. I can fix this. I can pay you, man. Any amount you want. That's when I felt it snap. Not my temper, but restraint. Money? You think this was ever about money? My words came out steady, quiet. You took more than money ever could buy. Thunder rolled outside. A flash of lightning burst through the small window, lighting both of us in white for a single heartbeat, the soldier and the traitor. Julian reached out again, palm open. I swear I'll leave. You'll never see me again. That's the problem, I said softly. I'll still know you're breathing somewhere. The rest was muscle memory. I drew the sidearm, aimed low, and fired twice. Precision shots, legs first. He screamed, collapsing into mud, grabbing at his thighs, blood mixing with rainwater. I stayed back, watching the life leak out of him slowly. Soldiers are taught to shoot center mass. Rangers, though, we know the value of letting a man hear his own dying. He crawled toward the pigs now, still pleading, voice breaking from pain. I could have ended it with one shot. Instead, I knelt beside him, forcing his gaze up. You're going to live long enough to think about every second of it. The pain, the sound, the look in Violet's eyes. You took everything good and turned it into fear. He spat, blood mixing with rain. You're sick, Hunter. You're no different than me. I leaned close enough for him to see the calm in my eyes. That's where you're wrong. You hurt a child. I'm just ending a threat. He laughed once, weakly, then winced. If I die here, they'll know it was you. They won't find you. He blinked, confused, until he realized where he was lying, the edge of the feeding pit. The pigs gathered, drawn by the iron smell of blood. The largest one squealed, hungry. Rainwater carried streaks of red along the slope. Julian's scream cut through the storm as he tried to drag himself backwards, hands slipping uselessly. I didn't shove him. I didn't need to. Gravity and panic did it for me. When it was over, there was no sound left except the rain and the restless animals. I wiped my hands, breathing steady. I wasn't shaking. No thrill. No horror. Just completion. Once outside, I burned my gloves, poured gasoline over what was left of Julian's truck, and lit the match. The flames climbed fast, reflecting orange against the black clouds. I walked back through the woods slowly, leaving no footprints, no sign I'd ever been there. By morning, the fire would be called accidental. A drunk man, careless with fuel near a storm-soaked barn. The pigs would be blamed for the rest. Nature's cleanup. When I reached my truck, I sat for a long while, rain still hammering down. I didn't feel guilt or relief, just silence. My hands were steady again. My breathing slow. The soldier had done his job. Some people think revenge is chaos. But the truth? It's order. It's balance restored. By the time the sun rose, I was home. Violet was still asleep, peaceful and warm beneath her blanket. I brushed her hair gently, smiled faintly, and whispered, "It's over." She stirred and smiled without opening her eyes. "Pancakes." I swallowed hard. "Yeah, baby. Pancakes. I made them like I promised." The smell of maple syrup filled the kitchen, mixing with the sound of rain softening outside. For the first time in months, the air felt quiet again. But deep down, I knew silence never lasts. For every sin buried, the earth eventually whispers back. And the whisper was already on its way. For 2 weeks, the world pretended to move on, but silence had weighed again. Julian's name disappeared from social circles like smoke in the wind. His business partners released short statements. "Tragic accident. May he rest in peace." Local news ran one short segment. "Fire at rural property kills local landowner. No foul play suspected." That was it. No detectives knocking at the door, no grand headlines, just a burnt barn, a dead drunk, and cleaned up filings. I almost believed it was finished. Almost. But death has a way of echoing back. It started small. One evening, just before dusk, I saw a black sedan idling near our street intersection. Not close, but not far. The kind of distance law enforcement likes when they're watching. 2 days later, another car, different color, but same mirror antenna. My gut told me exactly what it was. Someone hadn't bought the accident story. A week later, the doorbell rang. 2 men stood on the porch, one in a navy windbreaker with county sheriff stitched on the chest, the other in a suit, plain, polished, federal. My heart slowed instead of racing. Soldiers learn how to hide calm beneath storms. "Mr. Clark," the sheriff said, "we're following up on the Duane investigation. Mind if we ask a few questions?" I stepped aside. "Of course. Come in." They thanked me, polite, businesslike. The federal agent had eyes like glass, colorless, observant. He looked around the living room, noting the family photos, one of Morgan, tucked behind another frame, almost like she didn't belong there anymore. Violet's crutches leaned against the wall beside the couch. "You knew Mr. Duane a long time?" asked the sheriff, opening a notebook. 12 years, give or take." "Served together?" "In the Rangers. 3rd Battalion." He nodded. "We understand there was conflict recently. Legal disputes, restraining orders." "Yeah," I said softly. "Julian and I went separate ways. Lot of bad blood. Bad enough to make someone angry. I don't think anger ever left either of us alive," I replied. Then I smiled slightly, casual, non-defensive. "But you probably already read all that in the reports." The federal agent spoke for the first time, his tone quiet but sharp. "You were at the hospital with your daughter the night of the fire?" I nodded once. "Entire night. Nurses, cameras, parking logs. Check them all." He studied me, expression unreadable. Convenient timing. A pause hung between us, long, intentional. I let it stretch. The trick isn't to fill silence. It's to make the other man want to. "Finally," I said, "you think I killed him?" The sheriff shifted in his seat. The agent didn't deny it. "No," the agent said evenly. "We think you've had a lot taken from you. Men like you, trained, disciplined, they don't just lose control. They choose when to." I looked him dead in the eye. I didn't kill Julian Duane. And that, in a technical sense, was true. The pigs did the rest. They stayed another hour asking questions that had no meaning. Where I was that week, if I'd spoken to Morgan lately, whether Julian had enemies. I gave them straight answers, calm, structured, rehearsed but natural. The way you speak during debriefings after a mission. Just enough detail to satisfy, not enough to wander into danger. When they left, the agent paused at the door. "One last thing," he said. "If you think of anything, anything at all, you give me a call." He slid a card onto the table, crisp and white. His eyes stayed on me a second longer than needed. Then they were gone. The tailing started that night. Not every day, Not obvious, just enough for them to feel present. Sometimes a parked car 3 houses down. Sometimes a jogger who never turned to glance, but missed the same turn 3 mornings in a row. This wasn't panic. They were probing patterns. Watching if guilt twitched. I didn't flinch. I went about life as if nothing had changed. Violet healed fast, strong. She'd limped down the hall practicing steps without the crutches now, face wrinkled with concentration. Every time she stumbled, she grinned, saying, "I want to run again." That was the only thing keeping me human. Morgan drifted further away. The scandal, the guilt, maybe the suspicion, whatever it was, she stopped visiting Violet as often. I caught her once at the supermarket, same aisle, pretending not to notice me. But I noticed something else, a bruise on her wrist, faint, like someone had grabbed her recently. Old fear flickered in her eyes when I asked. She whispered, "His friends won't let it go." Then she walked off before I could ask more. Julian's world hadn't burned completely, it seemed. Some people missed his shadow. A few nights later, I got another visitor. Not the feds this time. An old face, Blake, a former Ranger buddy. He showed up unannounced, still sharp, still sober, still reading people better than any man should. We sat outside with beers, not talking much at first. Somewhere down the block, thunder grumbled again. "So they think it was you," Blake said finally. "Seems that way." He took a slow sip. "Was it?" I didn't answer. He didn't push. After 13 years of service together, he already knew the truth just by how I breathed. "You remember Cobble?" he asked quietly. "How you said sometimes justice ain't about right or wrong. It's about weight?" He set his bottle down. "If this is weight, you better be ready to carry it for life." I nodded. "Already am." He stood after a while, patted my shoulder once, the only kind of goodbye men like us know how to give, and left without another word. The next morning, I found a brown envelope by my door. No name, no address. Inside was a USB drive. My heart slowed when I saw it. Plugged it in using a burner laptop. Video files. News footage. Drone shot of the property aftermath. Police body cam footage labeled Dwayne_barn_inspection_02 on MP4. I clicked play. Inside the file, grainy night vision recorded officials combing through blackened wreckage. Smoke still curled upward from charred beams. The timestamp matched that night. And then, there was something odd. A burned truck bed, sheeted shape beneath tarp. And behind the blurred movement of firefighters, a reflection. Just a glint, in a broken window pane. A man's shape, watching from the tree line. My camouflage hood half slipped. Someone had sent this to me as a warning, or a test. I deleted the file immediately, smashed the drive, and buried the pieces deep in wet soil near the back fence. But the image stayed lodged behind my eyes. Someone else had been there that night. Whether it was law enforcement's hidden camera or a bystander, someone saw me walk away. For days, paranoia lingered. Every car engine outside made me tense. Every creak in the house made me ready. Sleep became rare, shallow. Even Violet noticed. "You okay, Dad?" she asked one morning, her voice small. "Yeah," I lied, pouring coffee. "Just tired of the rain." But the truth ate quietly at the edges. I was trained to fight enemies visible and armed. But this was a ghost, unseen, patient, maybe closer than I realized. 2 weeks later, the sheriff returned. Alone this time. Said he had routine clarifications. But I saw the truth in his tone. Pressure from above. Someone wanted my story to crack. He paced around, scribbling notes. Experts analyzed the fire debris again. Gasoline traces, sure, but patterns odd. It looks poured in deliberate lines, not spilled. I met his eyes calm. "You think an addict like Julian could light a fire evenly while drunk?" He hesitated before closing his notebook. "You've seen combat. You get it, right? How one decision can spiral." "Every day," I said softly. He nodded. "Just remember, truth finds daylight eventually. It always does." When he left, I watched his taillights disappear down the road. The rain had stopped at last. Clear skies. Too clear. Evil doesn't vanish, it changes form. And something in me knew the next wave was coming, not from lawmen, but from Morgan. That night, she called crying. Her voice trembled through the line. "They're coming for you, Hunter. Julian's cousin, Victor, he hired someone. He told me you'd pay for it." I didn't speak for a full minute. "Where are you?" I asked finally. "At the motel outside Ridgeway." Her breath came fast. "Please, just leave town. Take Violet and go." I closed my eyes. Memories poured in. Julian's sneer, Violet's blood on my hands, Morgan's shaking voice that night after the shot. There's a moment every soldier feels before going back to war. The stillness before duty reclaims you. "I'm done running," I said. "If they want to finish what he started, they'll find out what unfinished looks like." "Hunter," the line cut. Static hissed for a few seconds before silence. I set the phone down slowly. Outside, the wind kicked up again, carrying the scent of rain across the yard. Pigs, justice, fire, all behind me now. And yet, justice wasn't built to last when hate kept breathing. By dawn, Violet's backpack was packed for her aunts again. I kissed her forehead, told her dad had to take care of something. Something small. She hugged me without question. As I loaded the truck, the reflection in the mirror showed what I already knew. The man staring back wasn't just a father anymore. Not a ranger either. Something else had been born in the ashes of that barn. Something justice couldn't name and vengeance couldn't soothe. Something inevitable. By Friday morning, the air in the house felt wrong again. Too still, too quiet, the kind that usually comes before something breaks. Violet was already at my sister's, safe, thank God. I stood there in the kitchen staring at the phone, replaying Morgan's call in my head. Her tears, her warning, it had sounded real. But the longer I thought about it, the more it started to feel off. Morgan never warned anyone. Not when Julian was alive. Not when the affair began. Not when my life was falling apart. She only ever moved when someone else pulled the strings. And I had a gut feeling this was no different. Her motel location wasn't random. Ridgeway sat halfway between town and the burnt property. Too close to the ghosts for coincidence. So I got in the truck, armed but quiet. No plans beyond confirmation. Just that soldier's instinct that whispers, something's wrong, and you already know what. The highway stretched empty under gray skies. Clouds hung low like dirty smoke. My mind ran scenarios the whole drive. Was she setting me up for Victor, Julian's cousin? For a payoff? Or maybe this was just guilt pretending to be redemption. By the time I pulled into Ridgeway, the rain had started again, soft and constant. I parked across from the seedy strip motel she'd mentioned. Neon sign flickering half dead, vacancy. Weekly rates. Her car was there. That same silver sedan I'd once bought for her birthday 6 years ago. I stared at it for a long minute, quietly amused by how betrayal ages even metal. When I knocked on the door, she opened quickly, as if she'd been pacing. Eyes red, hair messy, fear bleeding through every breath. For a second, it almost looked real. "Hunter," she whispered, "you shouldn't have come." I had to see for myself. She stepped aside, hesitating, like she wasn't sure if she was letting me in or trapping me. The room smelled like cheap air freshener and something else, metallic. Gun oil. There it was again. That whisper in my gut. She tried to talk. Fast, nervous. Victor and one of his guys, they're looking for you. I told them you didn't kill Julian, but they don't care. So where are they now? She flinched. "You have to trust me, please." I didn't answer. I scanned the room from habit. 2 empty coffee cups. One chair slightly angled toward the window. Curtains half drawn, as if someone had been checking outside recently. A black duffel bag near the dresser. Slight bulge, too square for clothes, too heavy to be casual. "Morgan," I said quietly, stepping closer. "Tell me the truth." She looked up, tears welling. But the timing was wrong, just a beat too practiced. "I'm trying to save you." "No, you're trying to save yourself." That's when the silence cracked. A faint shift of floorboards in the next room. I turned instantly, hand drawing to the holster beneath my jacket. The connecting door between the two motel rooms creaked open, slow. A man stepped through, a big one, heavy shoulders, cropped hair, military boots. Not local, not law. Victor's hired help. He had a gun already drawn, lower ready position. Easy, Ranger, he said with a smirk. Let's not make this messy. Morgan stepped back, trembling, or pretending to. Please don't. I didn't hesitate. The closest object was a lamp, base heavy, cord short. I swung it hard, directly into the muzzle flash as he raised his weapon. The pistol discharged once, too high, shattering a wall frame. I closed the gap in 2 strides, grabbed his wrist, twisted, and used his own momentum to shove him into the dresser mirror. Glass exploded across the carpet. Morgan screamed. The man hit the floor hard, dazed. I pulled the gun from his hand, kicked it away, and pinned him down with a knee to his back. My own weapon pressed against his skull, cold and steady. Who sent you? I demanded. He groaned, trying to twist. I pushed harder, bone grinding. Who? He spat blood, voice muffled. Her. The word dropped in slow motion. Her. I turned my head, just enough to look at Morgan. She stood frozen, one hand covering her mouth, eyes wide. Not guilt, not surprise, fear of exposure. She offered me cash, the man said, coughing. Said she'd split whatever Julian left behind. Morgan stepped back until her calves hit the bed frame. He's lying. But her voice cracked on the second word. I lowered the gun to the man's neck. How long? He coughed out the truth between shallow breaths. They've been planning since before the fire, insurance money, property. Victor was supposed to take half if you went down clean. I remembered the paperwork Julian forged, the forged signatures, the real estate transfer plans. It all made sense now. Julian died, but the game hadn't ended. They just changed dealers. Morgan dropped into the chair, face buried in her hands. It wasn't supposed to go this far, she whispered. You said that the first time, I replied quietly. For a moment, everything in the room stilled. The rain outside got heavier, masking every sound until all that remained was breathing. Hers shallow, mine steady. Then the man on the floor tried to move again. I pressed harder until he passed out cold. His body went limp. Morgan lifted her head slowly, mascara running. Hunter, you don't understand. He said Julian's family would come after me too. I was scared, I said, cutting her off. So you sold me again. Tears streamed down her face now, mixing with sweat. You were never supposed to die. They just needed proof of what you did, that's all. Once you're arrested, they stop. Arrested? She reached for her purse and pulled out a small black recorder. My heart went cold. They wanted you to confess, she whispered. On tape. About Julian. I stared at the device in her hand, that tiny piece of plastic carrying everything. Quietly, evenly, I stepped closer. And if I refused? Her answer was barely audible. They'd use Violet instead. For the first time in years, pure rage hit me. Not the kind that blinds, but the kind that focuses like a blade. I took the recorder gently from her shaking hand and dropped it into the half-empty cup of coffee. The liquid hissed as it shorted out. If you ever even speak my daughter's name again, I said, low, whisper calm, I'll bury what's left of your lies beside Julian's. She broke completely then, sobbing. She slid off the chair like her legs couldn't hold her. But I felt nothing. No pity, no memory of who she once was. Just resignation, like watching the final card in a house you knew would fall eventually. I took the unconscious man's weapon, checked the chamber, and tossed it onto the wet ground outside the door. Then I leaned down beside Morgan, spoke quietly, almost kindly. There's a police tip line open 24 hours. You tell them everything. The cheating, the cover-up, Victor, this idiot lying on your carpet. Say you were scared for your life. Because if you don't, if you try to hide again, I'll come back for the truth myself. She nodded through sobs, trembling so hard she couldn't find words. I walked out into the rain, the motel lights flickering behind me. Every step away felt lighter than the last. The war was almost done, but wars rarely end without one final explosion. As I drove off, headlights carving through fog, I saw a figure in my rearview mirror. Morgan standing on the balcony, staring after me like a ghost who suddenly realized she was already dead. By midnight, I was back on the main road. The phone buzzed once, a new message from an unknown number. "We know what you did. See you soon." No name, no number trace. But whoever sent it used the exact phrase Julian once used after every mission we barely survived. "See you soon, brother." I looked out at the dark stretch of highway, rain pounding harder, and whispered to myself, not this time. Because this wasn't about war anymore. This was about erasing the last link to a story that had gone too far to ever fix. And I already knew exactly where the final chapter would end. The storm finally passed. For the first time in months, sunlight slid through the cracks in the clouds and landed across my porch, washing everything in soft gold. The world looked clean again, like the earth itself wanted to move on. But the weight in my chest reminded me that peace never comes free. It had been 3 weeks since the motel night. 3 weeks since Morgan turned in that confession and took the plea deal that saved her from jail but cost her everything else. The police wrapped up their investigation like they always do, half-truths tied in neat little reports. Victor disappeared. The man she hired turned state witness. Their world devoured itself. No help from me needed. I buried the last evidence out beyond the property line. The burned glove, the old map of Julian's farm, everything that connected me to that night. I didn't do it out of fear. I did it because it's what soldiers do after the mission ends. They cover their tracks, clear the field, and walk away. When I open my eyes these days, I still hear echoes sometimes. The thunder, her scream, that single gunshot that tore through everything I loved. Some nights I wake up reaching for a weapon I no longer need. But every morning I look at Violet. I realize why I'm still standing. She's walking again now. Stubborn kid. Says she wants to run like before. Physical therapy left scars on her leg, but her spirit? Untouched. She still laughs at stupid cartoons, still hums when she brushes her hair, still thinks her dad can fix anything. Maybe that's what redemption looks like. Not forgiveness, but survival. We moved to a small town far north, where the air smells like cedar and rain feels new again. I built a workshop behind the new house, kept my hands busy with wood and silence. No television, no news, just me and the sound of sawdust settling. Some neighbors ask about my limp, or the tattoos for my service, or why I always keep lights low after sundown. I tell them the truth, that I spent too many years seeing the world in flashbang white, and now I prefer the dark. It makes peace feel more real. Every once in a while, when I drive into town, I see families laughing at diners, parents holding kids close, people living small, ordinary lives. I envy them, but only in passing. Because every scar, every lie, every sleepless night, it all built the man who can finally sit still and breathe. One evening, Violet asked me something that stopped time. "Dad," she said softly, "do people change after they hurt someone?" I looked up from my workbench, caught off guard. "Why do you ask?" "I just wonder if Uncle Julian could have been different." The world went quiet again, the kind of silence where you can hear your own heartbeat echo. I knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "Some people can," I said slowly. "Others don't want to. They just keep choosing wrong until wrong is all they know." She nodded, thinking hard, like she was trying to fit that truth somewhere in her heart. "I'm glad you chose right then." That one line, that tiny, honest sentence, was the closest thing to peace I'll ever get. That night, after she went to sleep, I sat outside with a mug of coffee, watching the stars. The cold bit through my bones like memory, but it didn't hurt. Not anymore. I thought about Julian's words, Morgan's lies, the blood, the fire, the pigs, the silence. All of it. And I realized something simple. Revenge doesn't heal. It just clears the noise so you can finally hear what's left of yourself. When soldiers return from war, they say you never stop fighting. You just change battlefields. And for me, This story, this war, it finally ended the moment I decided to live, not fight. Before bed, I checked the door locks, the windows, the corners of the house like I always do. Habit never dies. But when I lay down beside the quiet hum of the heating vent, I let myself fall asleep without a gun under my pillow for the first time in years. The next morning, sunlight woke me before the alarm. I sat on the porch again, listening to birds instead of memories. Violet's laughter carried from inside the house, light, alive, whole. And I smiled, a real one this time. Because after everything, that was the victory no bullet could steal from me. And maybe now, the story ends not with punishment, but with peace. Because every storm, no matter how violent, eventually breaks, and the sun always comes back. Before we close this chapter, I want to ask you something. If you'd lived my life, lost a friend, lost trust, lost everything that made you feel safe, would you still believe forgiveness is possible? Tell me in the comments. I want to know what you would have done. And hey, if this story kept you on edge till the end, do me a small favor. Hit that like button. Not for me, but for the stories that remind us we're still human. Subscribe to Betrayal Stories Lab for the next thriller, another true heart revenge tale that'll twist around your heart before letting it go. You can also tell me in the comments what kind of stories you love most. Cheating wife, family revenge, betrayal between brothers, soldier's heartbreak, whatever burns in your mind. I'll bring that story alive next, just for you. Until then, take care of yourself. Hold the people you love a little tighter. Because sometimes, the quietest heroes are the ones still standing after the fire. I'm Hunter Clark, and this was my final mission.